Hi everybody, it's Catherine and I'm here today with Claire, or tonight with Claire. Sorry about the lighting. I'm a little bit sensitive to the light. But we are here to look at A Clash of Kings Cat, is it 6 to
Yes.
Theon 4. And so that's 45 to 50. And just so you know, next week we'll be going all the way from Jon 6 to Sansa 5. That's our first Sansa chapter in a while, right?
Yes.
So yeah, we were just saying there's like 4 chapters we probably don't have very much to say about, and then 2 that we do have, I'm guessing.
Yeah.
So yeah, so starting with Kat, I mean, this is a lot of her thinking about her duty. The thing that stuck out with me with this chapter is she thinks about giving her maidenhood to Ned, and she also thinks about. I'm trying to think. I think she thinks about all of the most evil characters in the book. I don't think she leaves anyone out. We've Joffrey, the Mountain, Ramsay, and Tywin. They all have, and Roose. They're all mentioned in this chapter. I can't think of anything outside of those five. I mean, if you're going to name the most evil characters, the most sociopathic characters, they'd probably be the top 5, right?
Yeah.
They're all mentioned in this chapter, and it made me think she has this sense of dread, even though on the surface, Robb and Ed Muir are doing really well, militarily. She has this kind of sense of dread, and I think it's her instincts telling her that something isn't right with the situation. And just with the mentioning of those 5, it's all kind of building on that, and it made me kind of think that there's a lot about Tyrion in this chapter as well, and how she doesn't trust Tyrion, and yet she uses the same technique Tyrion used with Jaina Slint, she uses with Cleas Frey. And that's getting drunk and then find out, getting kind of off guard a bit. And it made me wonder, is she not trusting Tyrion? Does she not trust herself as well? Because she would easily hand over Jaime if she thought she could get Sansa and Arya back, even though that's not the right thing to do in this situation. And
she's already thinking about that, isn't she? She's seriously giving it.
Yeah. It made me wonder, is that kind of baseline of this instinct for dread and evil, but also this kind of conflict where she can't fully trust herself to make the right decision, how that will inform her as Lady Stoneheart. I couldn't quite come up with a theory, and sorry, this is very unsatisfying, but I was just trying to think, how will that feed into Cat the White, or does it feed into her at all later on? But yeah, that's kind of all I got from this, just her instincts, that sense of dread.
I think you've been quite kind. But I think you're right. I hadn't thought of it that way. I hadn't thought about the people that she'd mentioned in this chapter. But I picked the book up this week. I'm doing a bit of both at the moment, reading and listening to the audio. And it was just that sense of, oh God, what we're starting with as a Cat chapter. So I had this sense of dread and doom just going into reading this chapter, to be honest. And it's just, I don't know whether I'm just kind of a bit more biased now, or I just seem to have convinced myself that I just really dislike this character. But she just fucking annoys me in this chapter. It's just all talk. I mean, I know that she's lost Ned, and I know that obviously, she's grieving. I'm not taking that away, but it's just this constant talk about misery and burden and duty all the time. And I mean, even like when Edmure leaves at the beginning of the chapter to go out to battle, and she's just miserable and maudlin, and it's like he leaves without much love from his sister at all, and that might be the last time they ever see each other as siblings. He's going out to battle, and she's still picking and criticizing. I mean, later on in the chapter, when he comes back and clearly he's you know, he's defended the river and he's been successful, and his men all come back and they're all in the kind of, you know, party mood and they're shouting Stark and Tully, and Kat thinks to herself that, well, that's quite good, because, you know, that people are being cheerful because the mood in Riverrun has been strained and somber. And it's like, no shit. Why do you think that might be, Kat? You know, because she's just so miserable. And it's, I mean, it's interesting, though, because at this point, I think she finally realizes that Edmure isn't a boy anymore and he can hold his own. And actually, he was successful, and he defended several parts of the river from being breached, and, you know, they came back without being defeated. And the Lannisters, you know, scattered. But it just, yeah, I didn't really get a great deal from this chapter, apart from some of the things that she said about bastards. Yes. So she was talking about how the Lords treat bastards differently, and she was thinking about how Roose treats Ramsay as opposed to how Ned treated Jon. And she also starts to think about Edric and how, so she's kind of piecing things together in her mind about the lineage around Joffrey, and that, you know, these are bastards born of incest, and what Stannis's motivations must have been. So she's thinking about how he would have wanted to parade him around the realm to show the difference between this, you know, this dark-haired boy and Joffrey and the other siblings. And then she starts thinking about Jon and Jon's mother. So it's interesting that she's thinking about that. She's thinking about bastards, and she's making those comparisons about how they are treated differently. I wonder if that then starts making her think about how she treated Jon. I don't know. I mean, it's funny, she does think of Jon quite a bit.
She does, yeah.
She seems to think about Jon maybe
more than she does about Rickon.
Yes.
She never thinks about Rickon.
No, yeah.
Which is very strange when you think about it, because he's the youngest, and the youngest, like, that he will be her last child now.
Yeah.
You know, and the youngest does tend to get, people do tend to think about the youngest a lot, because
a bit more attention,
especially when he doesn't have any attention. And I don't know, like, she thinks about being split into 5 pieces, so she wished she could have been split into 5 pieces, because 5 pieces of her children. I think Rickon would probably be just her big toe, the way she thinks about him. I feel in this chapter, though, it does reveal a lot about the role of women, and she doesn't admit it, but there is, like, the way she treats Brienne, I think there's a lot of envy there, that she, like, Brienne doesn't allow her gender to define who she's going to be. She doesn't allow that to be her identity. And, you know, Kat buys dresses for her, gets dresses made for her, and Brienne is like, nah, not having that. And hi Kay. And just for Kat, the value in a woman at this stage is whether they're a virgin. That was her value, that when she was younger, and whether they're a mother. Like, that's, as soon as her mother died, she became the woman, but only in the sense that she was a virgin. And, you know, even though Hoster thinks of her as like the oldest son or whatever, technically, she's not. Like, she was basically sent off because, you know, she was a woman. He never sent Edmure away. So that's you could maybe take that out of the chapter, but other than that, you are right. She is pretty miserable. She feels sorry for Littlefinger. It's like a fleeting line, but, you know, something about she gave her favor to Brandon and sent Littlefinger away or something like that. There's some line.
Right, I can't remember that, but there's a reference. Yeah. I mean, she does think about Littlefinger and that time quite a bit. So I mean, the only other thing that I've got really is the reference to the Sept at Riverrun, and how it was, again, this isn't unusual, this description of septs when you walk in, and the experience is that you feel that it's flooded with rainbow light. And you get this in lots of different scenarios in the Sept of Baelor, here at the Riverrun Sept, and it just triggers me every time I hear that because it reminds me so much of the Wall and the description of the light being reflected through the Wall and how it's looked like rainbow light, and I just can't help but think there's what we know of magic and religion is probably, I think there may something may come to light about that, whether it is there's a religion within another religion, or whether the old gods and the new gods are the same thing, or whether, I mean, later on, there's something that I kind of noticed that I hadn't noticed before in the Dany chapter that sort of relates back to religion as well. There's lots and lots of similarities in that chapter with Bran, I thought. But yeah, it was just that mention again of the Sept always seems to have this description of being, you know, reflection of rainbow or flooded with rainbow light, and I just think there's something to that. And it's there again.
Yeah, it is. If I was going to tie this section of chapters together, the one thing that does run through all of these chapters is a sense of dread and acting on your instincts, or because that's in every single chapter that we read this week, all the way into Theon's chapter when he has those nightmares at the beginning.
Yeah.
And yeah, so that's it for Cat. Will we move into Bran? That was the quickest chapter ever. Bran then will probably be another quick one, except it's notable because this is really the last time we'll see Bran at Winterfell.
Yeah.
So and he yields Winterfell, he yields to Theon. So he gives it up, and he literally will give it up. This is it. He's not going, I don't think he's going to be back at Winterfell ever.
No.
Not as Bran anyway. And it is interesting then that it starts off with a lot of this chapter at the beginning is about him through Summer's eyes, and being very aware of his brother, Shaggy Dog. Now, do you think Rickon is also warging at that stage?
I think he is, but he's having a different experience to Bran.
Okay.
So I think the connection is definitely there between Shaggy Dog and Rickon, but whether or not he's having the same, I mean, he does have the same dream. He does have the same dream previously, and Maester Lewin just dismisses it as like it's one of those things, but they both have the same dream about Ned dying and end up in the crypts. So they do have, so that's without question that a similar thing is happening to Rickon and Shaggy Dog, but I don't think it's at the same level of, I mean, there isn't a great deal of awareness really with Bran at this point, apart from just him beginning to realise that what the reeds are telling him could be, he's just trying to make sense of it at the moment, because he's got Maester Lewin telling him one thing and the reeds telling him something else, and then he's actually having these dreams. So he's obviously trying to make sense of it. What Rickon could be going through, who knows? I mean, Rickon may be the strongest warg of them all, but we don't know.
Because the reason I ask is he thinks he doesn't even use Shaggy Dog or Rickon really. He uses my brother a lot.
Yeah.
And I just wonder, is that, this is going to sound really weird, is that Summer thinking of his brother, Shaggy Dog, or is that Bran thinking of his brother, Rickon? Or is it at a point now where they're both warging to such an extent that they're indistinguishable from one another? Those relationships are now bonded together, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, no, I think
like the identical twin men that married the identical twin women. They're just like
no, like, it is
together.
I think there is that it's indistinguishable bond between them, and that he's aware that If it's Summer thinking it, he knows that Shaggy Dog is his brother, but he also knows that Rickon is Bran's brother, and that the two have a link, the same way that Summer has the link to Bran. But it's just the way the direwolves seem to, in fact, all of the magical creatures in these chapters, there's lots of like adverse reactions to certain things. Like Drogon flips out in the House of the Undying, and here the direwolves seem to want to desperately leave Winterfell. It's like they can't wait to get out, and they feel like trapped in the walls of the castle. There's a reference to, I mean, what they're doing is they're hunting and they're smelling fear of other animals and all this kind of visceral, animalistic kind of wargy wolf stuff. But they also reference waking the sleepers. Now, that could just be, oh, there's danger approaching. We need to let the people that are in the Man Rock, i.e. the castle, the walls, know what's happening. We need to wake the sleepers. Or is that something else? What the hell does wait? Who are they? Who are they? Who are the sleepers? And what does that mean from the direwolf perspective? There's this weird section here about the tree being described as the sentinel, and this desperate rush, this hurry to get to the tree, and then to actually jump. He runs up to the tree and jumps inside the tree. And I've just made a note here of like, what? So the direwolves are using the tree for something. Does the tree make the connection to Bran even stronger? Does Summer know that that's the case, and that's why he's running to the tree? Because he thinks the connection that I've got with Bran will amplify to give him a warning, to let him know, and that's waking the sleepers. I don't know. But yeah, it's like he's trying to communicate whatever the danger is that they're facing to Bran. But then Bran's already in Summer's body, so it's just very strange. These experiences of Bran being Summer and walking into Summer, and what the direwolves' reaction is, it's just very strange the way it's written. It's like there's something that I'm not getting, and I don't know what it is. I think it's I'm trying to read this from the direwolves' perspective, and it's hard because, you know, they have different words for things, so you have to try and figure out what they mean from their perspective. But the main thing that I got is they do not want to be in Winterfell. They want to leave. So why is that?
Oh, sorry, that was my phone. I should have put that on silent.
I mean, is it just because they sense the danger? Or is it because there's fundamentally something nasty at Winterfell? And in terms of old magic, the direwolves just, you know, let's get out of Dodge.
Yeah, I think like the idea that there's like this common thing about instinct running throughout this. My sense of it was, the more I read that with Summer, and I read it a couple of times because I like, obviously Dany wouldn't be in her position without Drogon and without the dragons. Dany is not a character without them. She needs the dragons. That's it. But the direwolves, I was wondering, kind of like what you were saying there, with Bran. How much does Bran need the direwolves? Like, obviously he has this power, but when he originally fell, Summer was also aware he seemed to be aware that there was something bad happening. Even way back in Game of Thrones. So I just wonder, like, when we get to the Dany chapter, like you said earlier on, that there's a lot of kind of echoes mirroring between these two chapters. How much of the magic in the north is dependent on magical creatures like the direwolves and their strength? Like, even in the Theon chapter, they talk about how the direwolves going potentially being intelligent enough to know to walk upstream rather than downstream. They might be intelligent enough to hide their footprints, basically, to hide from human beings. I don't know if I'm making much sense, but
or it could be that, because I had the same questions about like who. I mean, this is later on in Theon's chapter, but like who somebody sets a false trail. Who does that? Is it Osha? Is it? It could be in the scenario that you're describing that it's Bran has actually walked into the wolves to get them to like double back on themselves. Or maybe they are intelligent enough to know, this is what we're doing. We need to set a false trail. This is it's a decoy. But I get the impression that these characters are being guided somehow by the magical creatures, like somehow subconsciously, whatever. It's not there's definitely that feeling of a link there between the Dany and the dragons and Bran and Shaggy Dog and the Stark children and their wolves generally. But I mean, I suppose you could think the only one that you can is Sansa. She doesn't have her magical creature anymore. So does that mean that her, what's she being guided by? Well, by her own metal, really.
Well, potentially in a non-magical world, which there's every reason to believe it will be largely non-magical by the end of the series. Like, we may not have dragons and direwolves the way they're going. Sansa will be more equipped to deal with that world than anyone else.
Yeah.
Because Jon has ghosts, Dany has the dragons. She's the only one that there's almost there is an echo always in her mind where she's thinking about what she's doing, thinking about the narratives that have driven her this far, thinking about the decisions of the past, of others, of herself, that have gotten her to this stage. So she doesn't have that kind of safety net, because Dany definitely uses Drogon as a safety net, and Bran is definitely will use Summer as a safety net later on. In the absence of anyone to guide them, parents or whatever. And Jon uses Ghost all the time. So, I mean, the last Jon chapter we saw, that was the last Jon chapter where they found the dragon glass, right? Because of Ghost, basically.
But it does make you wonder on another level, like, do the direwolves have their own like self-determination, or are they being guided by somebody else that then guides the characters? So, for example, the desperation that the direwolves seem to have to leave Winterfell, and then, funnily enough, Bran and Rickon leave Winterfell, and it's like, is that because the direwolves wanted it, or is it just a happy coincidence that the direwolves are like, oof, phew, thank God we're out of there now? Or is the whole purpose of the direwolves being there and being planted, if you like, into the children's lives because somebody else has made that happen? And if that's the case, is that the three-eyed raven? Is it the old gods? And there is some sort of manifestation of, I know that we're not supposed to see gods and things like that, but yeah, it just made me wonder, why do the direwolves seem to want to leave Winterfell? And you could, that's easy, it's because they sense the danger of the Ironborn approaching. But I think it seems to be more than that, especially with this other thing about Wake the Sleepers. There seems to be a real link to old magic in this chapter.
So do you think the Sleepers are anything similar to the Undying in Dany's chapter?
Maybe, yeah, some sort of manifestation of the old gods, because especially the tree and the sentinel. Sentinel is like a symbolic thing as well, for the old gods and the old. For some reason, I'm really fascinated by what old magic is, because according to the world of Ice and Fire, what the religion that was practiced by the first men is similar but not the same as the religion that's practiced by the children of the forest.
Yeah, we'll talk about the undying when we get to it, because actually, so some of the things that you've been saying for this reread, I think there potentially is evidence for what you're saying when we get to the undying. A couple of other things with this chapter, of course, Jojen's visions all come true, and Bran recognizes that. Especially with the drowning and the blood and all that kind of thing. Interestingly, Theon, 2 people bend the knee in this chapter to Theon, and in the next Theon chapter, one of them will already betray him, and in hindsight, we know that the other betrays him as well. And there's already Reek is already kind of laying the groundwork for that betrayal in the next Theon chapter. So it just shows, and even Bran betrays Theon. So anyone that basically swears to Theon in this chapter,
all the pledge. If you pledge into Theon, it means shit, basically.
Yeah,
it's there's quite a few things actually in these chapters that make you kind of go, oh god, yeah, of course, that was an obvious like setup for it's it's
Can we just stop to applaud Osha and how badass she is?
Yeah, I know she is.
Take it at the spear. Oh, just brilliant, so good. And just that kind of, she is an excellent example of what the others are not, with the exception of Dany and Tyrion, perhaps maybe Arya. Acting on your instincts is generally a good idea in this world. Theon doesn't. Bran is acting. The conversation we just had, I wonder what instincts Bran is acting on. Is it half Summer, half Three-Eyed Raven, or his own? Osha is she's just like, this guy's bad news.
Well,
I am going to show him. I'm going to take what's mine, the iron blood, the iron way. Like, even though she's a wildling, she clearly has been paying attention to whatever lessons Bran has been having. Or she's clearly learned what the Ironborn respect, because they all instantly just laugh and they don't see her. In that instance, she goes from being like a sexual being to a warrior, and that's it. Like, when you cross that divide for the Ironborn, that's it. You don't.
Well, there's a thing about where in the books where we're at the moment, where we're up to currently, and from what we can gather, Rickon is on Skagos with Osha, and in the books, Davos is told that he's going on this mission to bring back the Liege Lord of Winterfell back to the north. So this is the whole Manderley plot at White Harbour. And if you think about it, some people really have play this manifestation of the 7 gods and real physical characters in the story, and I think Davos would be a great proponent for father, because he's so many sons and so many tragedies and so many, it's almost like he is the epitomal father, but he's had this like tragedy in his life. And then you've got Rickon, who's lost both his mother and his father, and then you've got Osha, and it's almost like what we could see in the next books, if we ever get to find out, if there happens to ever be us following Davos through a Davos point of view to arrive at Skagos and in meeting up with Rickon and Osha, it's kind of like Rickon has got this archetypal mother and father figure from like godly kind of manifestations of real people, but he's got what he lost, which is his mother and his father in Davos and Osha. So we could have this whole side plot of like, the adventures of Rickon and his new mum and dad.
George, when you're finished the series, can you please give us like a spin-off with those three? Yeah. And also, it's funny
because like Joni and Chachi.
The irony is like the highborn kid is going to be way more uncivilized than the wildling and the smuggler.
Yeah,
that's brilliant. That is brilliant. I like that a lot. I'm going to say hello to AU. John is in the chat. Hi, AU. I'm really hoping we get a Davos chapter from Scarlet. Okay, will we move on to Arya?
Yeah.
I think these are going to be the two big chapters that we're going to talk about today. Arya and Dany. I'll let you take it away. I mean, we start with the.
Well, funnily enough, I haven't got a massive amount from this, so I think you've probably got more on this than me. I've just got that it's just some observations that, again, the setup of Arya's character about her feeling comfortable in the darkness and in the dead of night, about moving around, you know, in secret in the dead of night, and she feels powerful, that she still has one life to go under her belt, and how desperately weak she feels again at the end when that she's used up that final life. There's a couple of things that I've made note of here about the weirwood at Harrenhal, and she comes across a tree in the weirwood and she notices that the face is twisted, full of hate, which makes me think that that's somehow the tree communicating to her about what's happening with Theon and the Winterfell situation. But maybe she just doesn't realise that that's the kind of message. I don't know. Arya doesn't seem to feel faith or have the same faith in gods that both her mother and her father had. So she doesn't seem very religious. She doesn't have a great deal of faith. And considering what's happened to her so far, I don't blame her. She seems to make very rash decisions based on emotions, and that's her downfall, I think. Now, you could say that's her age. The whole thing about the rescue of the Northern Men was something that was a pretty rash decision, really, based on emotions. The whole thing that she did with Jack and Agar about his name, about giving him his own name, was a silly, childish thing to do. But again, it was based on emotions, you know, that kind of, you stupid. I just think that, and the only other two other things that I've got of note is when Jack and Agar says, "My time is done." Hey, obviously that just makes you think, well, what was it? What was your mission up to that point that makes you say, I've done it, my time is done? Yeah, it's kind of like what is on. I feel as though he's indoctrinating her into the faithless men.
That was my question as well. Yeah, is that what you think?
And I think he must have realised at some point, okay, that's it, I've done it now.
Although it did sound like he still had a mission to. Do you think that was his mission in that face?
I mean, maybe he just meant my time is done here in this scenario, because we know that, you know, there are other things that happen later on in Feast, in Old Town. But it just makes me think, at what point did Jack and Agar think, right, okay, that's it, I've finished my mission now with Arya? Is it when he gives her the coin that then now is like, okay, it's almost like I've endowed you you will eventually go to Bravos by giving you this coin. I know that that's what your destiny will be. Because he does kind of invite her to go to Bravos with him, and she says, I can't. I've got other things that need to be done, and she's obviously got a list, and she's got her own plans. Oh, as far as Arya's concerned, the relationship with Jack and Agar is, well, she didn't feel like a mouse. She felt like the ghost. She felt like she had the power when she had these three names that she could give him. And once that had finished, it was kind of like, oh, right, okay, well, you know, she moves on with her own with her own plan and her own mission, which is not to follow him to Bravos at that stage.
Yeah, so the reason I have so many questions, and I'll get back to the Bloody Mummers. I have a question about them as well. Let's stick with the Faceless Men thing, because you were saying there she kind of says his name in a childish way, and she does. There's a certain amount of malice there as well. And I wonder, because he's begging her, like, unsay it, like, unsay my name. And like she thinks that, God, he didn't even look this afraid when he thought he was burned to death, you know?
Yeah.
And she refuses to unsay his name. And I wondered, in a kind of a weird way, does that impress him? Is that like him? Oh, well, she is now ready to be a faceless man. She is completely willing to detach herself from somebody in an instant. If she has to. So yeah, I wondered with him, are there only a certain amount of deaths that you're allowed in a face before? Oh, hi, Ian. I didn't see there. Before, are there only a certain amount of deaths you're allowed to have in a face before you have to give it up? Like, are there a certain amount of lives you're allowed to take, and then you have to give it up? Because I couldn't really figure out the Faceless Men math. Like,
well, that would make sense too. When he says my time is done, that would mean my time with this face, because I've taken the maximum amount of lives that I can as this, Lorathi face.
And yeah, so what will that mean potentially for Arya if she continues to use the same face over and over again and doesn't know that you're only supposed to use a face a maximum amount of times? What happens if you don't? Maybe you and Ian have an idea about that. I just found it, I couldn't figure out, is it the death or the mission? Because he tells her that if he helps her free all these men, he's going to have to take way more lives, and she's only owed one. So I couldn't. Obviously, we don't have an answer to it, and it's all speculation at this stage. I couldn't really figure out how he marries those two things. We talked a little bit about the mission there. Also with Baisha and Rourke, how is there a certain trait with the Faceless Men where you learn how to cajole and manipulate people, not only through fear, which we know they're a bit afraid of him anyway, but they're willing to attack all these men? Is there a certain amount, is there almost like, can you convince people to do almost anything? Is there a certain amount of hypnosis involved in it?
I think there's a genuine fear of faceless men.
And so you think they know he is a faceless man?
I think they've maybe have guessed that he is, or they've witnessed him doing enough things to think, shit, he's
the real deal.
He's we better fall into line when it comes to what he said, because they are genuinely scared of him.
Yeah.
And
the other thing that I was just wondering, has he been looking for Arya for a while? And also I liked towards the end where she takes on yet a new identity with Nan. But also ends this chapter, like, obviously feeling a bit dejected now that she doesn't have her life and she's back to being a mouse and she's not a ghost anymore and all that kind of thing. And yet instantly takes on Nan, which made me think of old Nan, obviously. But also, is it Amory that's fed to the bear? And she thinks about Yoren being a big black bear, and that it's almost a revenge. So instantly, she goes from losing the faceless man, feeling shit about that, being forced to take on a new identity, and this idea of revenge being solidified once again in her mind through this new identity and through being able to identify the bear as Yoren, kind of saying to her, in her childlike mind, saying revenge will eventually come, like I'll eventually get mine. Sorry, AU, the question was about the faceless men. about changing faces. Like, is there only a certain amount of deaths you are allowed in a certain face? Is there a limit to what you can do? Because he changes. He seems to have to.
Or how many lives you can take?
How many lives you can take in that identity? Is there a limit to that? Because Arya kind of has to change her identity as well. Now, she's not a faceless man at this stage, but she is kind of forced to.
So we're suggesting that because we're alluding to Jack and Agar saying my time is done, and what he might have meant was my time with this face because I've taken the maximum amount of lives. That's what he may have meant by my time is done.
And I just had a question as well about the Bloody Mummers. At this stage, Vargo Holt and all that, they believe Roose to be on their side. Has Roose already betrayed them at this stage? And I suppose I should have talked about this in the cat chapter. It almost felt like the Mountain and all his men. There's something like Cat is told that so many Lannister men die in the river that they almost dam it up. It sounded to me like such a bad strategy from Tywin's point of view, and he sends the Mountain in, maybe knowing that he wouldn't die or something, because he's already worked out this strategy with Roose Bolton. So, do you think Roose Bolton has already betrayed the North? Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah. And I think the impression I get is the brave companions have turned the cloaks from Tywin to Roose.
Yeah. I don't think. Well, obviously Vargo Holt doesn't know that.
Exactly. He thinks they've turned the cloaks to ally with the North, but I think Roose is already in place by Tywin's hand. I mean, there's that interesting bit with Roose where he talks about leeching and about purging the bad blood. And I know there's loads of theories about Roose and who Roose is and what that. And I'm sure that you read these things in the reread and you think, oh, right, okay, I understand now where that particular theory comes from, or where that notion, where that originates from. And the leeching and Roose is, I mean, it's a really sinister kind of plot device to make the reader think, oh, this is a really sinister character. But it's the way he talks about purging bad blood, and it's like, what does he mean by that? What does he think the bad blood is? Is it just some sort of beauty routine cleansing thing that he's doing, or is there something there about the the whole thing about them flaying and how that they actually did that, in their history, and they wore the skins of their enemies, and just where the origins of House Bolton may come from, and what this phrase "purging bad blood" could mean, because blood to me is your family, is your lineage. So what does he mean by bad blood? Yeah.
Well, yeah, there's all those sorts of theories that they're are white and all this kind of thing because of his eyes. It made me think of Jane Eyre, actually. There's a lot about having bad blood and stuff like that in Jane Eyre. It also made me think of Keith Richards. AU, of course, gets to the heart of it. Yeah, you're absolutely right. He says, I think if they change faces, it's harder to follow and find them. And I suppose that's true. Jaqen would be, having committed such a act of violence, it would be very easy to pinpoint who he is at this stage. So he needs to change. That makes total sense, obviously. I don't know why I didn't think that. Ian says brave companions is the definition of a euphemism. Yeah, totally. And we're not done with them by any stretch as we go into wins. So that's Arya. That's all I have for Arya.
Yeah, me too.
Should we move on to
Dany?
So this is the big one. Big. This is, does everybody have their cup of tea and their questions? And this is so huge. It's one of the most read chapters in the series. right up there with Ned. 10, is that the Territory chapter?
Yeah.
It's way up there. It's such a great chapter. Completely butchered by the show. Although I didn't mind that it fits with the show, I guess, but it completely butchered mostly. So of course we're in the House of the Undying. I like that Ned 10 chapter. It doesn't waste any space. You're straight into it.
Yeah.
And it's great.
I think just you saying there about how the TV show butchered it, I think it was at this point for me that I thought, okay, I get it now. The TV show and the books are going to have to be very different from each other, because you can't take a separation like that. The imagery and the prophecy and everything that's loaded into this chapter, you can't remove that and replace it with what they did in the TV show without it being a blatant, right, okay, this is where things divide completely. And it took me a while to kind of sort of get it right in my head that I enjoy the TV show for the TV show, and I know when we do our house polish, we rip it to shreds for, you know, things like the timelines and stuff like that, but I had just have to enjoy that for what it is, as a medium of entertainment, and the books for me are something very different. And this was a huge area of like, okay,
they wouldn't have been able to achieve everything that she sees.
No, this is where it is different.
And I do like the Drogo moment in the House of the Undying in the TV show. I know it's cheesy as fuck, but any Jason Momoa, and I'm happy. Any bit more of him, and I'm happy. So yeah, there's two kind of separate lots of visions as she goes through this. She is warned going in to the House of the Undying. You know, Jorah, all her blood riders, whoever is there, don't go in. And you know, she says, Jorah says, I think it's Jorah that says, remember Miri Maz-Dor? And she says, that's exactly why I am remembering Miri Maz-Dor. This is why I want to go in. I learned a lot from that situation. I can learn a lot from this. And she's bringing Drogon with her. Interesting already that Drogon is the strongest one. And already it feels like he will ultimately potentially be the only one she's left with. Drogon, I feel. There's something, I don't know.
So I just want to point out that I think Iron Throne's emoji is hilarious. Promise me, nerd.
Oh, I missing this.
Just his emoji, promise me, nerd. Oh. And also, I don't know what's happened to Iron Throne, but he's just completely descended into like emoji speak.
Yeah, that's okay. I'm okay with that. We're down with the kids.
Yeah, I can see dragons and I can see a cup of tea, so that looks good enough to me.
Yeah. So mine has stopped working for some reason. I can't see anything. But anyway, so let me just refresh this. All right, now it should be back on track. So they go into the House of the Undying. She's told she can only go right, and she can only go up. She should never go down. And so she keeps going right. She sees a lot.
Before we even get there, before she goes into the House of the Undying, so she describes it as an evil, haunted place. Drogon is distressed straight away, right from the beginning. And there's this thing that just completely, totally took me by surprise, which I can't remember reading from any other reread that I've had before. And I've slept many nights since reading this chapter, is that there's a tree outside. Very briefly, Dany mentions that there's a tree with blue leaves that I think she either knows or she imagines is what is made, you know, the shade of the evening is made from these blue leaves. So it seems to be like blue leaves for this tree, red leaves for the weirwood. So it's kind of like the opposite of the weirwood trees, but similar in a way, because these leaves are pulped into some sort of mixture paste drink. That this, in fact, let me just say that this whole chapter for me, the theme of this entire chapter is blue. You get the blue leaves, you get the blue lips, you get the blue and indigo shadows, you get the king with the blue eyes, you get the blue rose growing, you get the blue is mentioned throughout this. And before she even goes into the House of the Undying, you see this tree with the blue leaves. She takes some concoction that's made from it that's shade of the evening, and it makes her go all trippy. She has these trippy visions and things, which is very, very similar to the red leaves of the weirwood, the paste that's made from that helps Bran have his weird visions and connections to the old gods, and his, you know, being able to see through the weirwood tree.
Yeah, does she mention a weirwood? I think she does, right? There is a weird. She sees a weirwood in one of the visions.
The doors inside the House of the Undying are made from ebony and weirwood, yes. And one of the doors has a human face. So there's so many parallels to what's happening with Bran and the weirwood and the red leaves and the magical paste that's made from these trees.
And let's not forget that Ned's Tower of Joy chapter, which I feel it just got a very similar kind of vibe. That's also as a result of taking Milk of the Poppy. You know, it's also another kind of like George. His formative years of the 60s, 70s, you know, like acid, ayahuasca, all that kind of thing. Like there's a lot, there is a very much, like you said, very trippy kind of feeling in this. And the blue is what I wanted to talk to you about when we get to it in relation to what you've been talking about over the last few weeks. So will we jump straight into the different visions that she sees first as she's going through the rooms? Do you want to do that?
Yeah, I mean, we can do that, but just to let you know that I paid less attention to that, to the bog standard, you know, 3 fires you must light, 3 mounts, and you know the visions. The visions that she, I kind of paid less attention to that and more of like what was going on around in this scene, and like there's this theme of blue. There's Drogon being extremely distressed. She's being offered things like secrets of magical, you know, weapons, and that they will be able to teach her how to communicate with her dragons and learn the secret dragon language. These are all things that will really help her, but she runs away from it.
I think without Drogon, she would have accepted some of those things. But we have a question from AU. Does any other sigil have the dragons? Or sorry, does any other sigil other than dragons have any effect on the story, or does it just serve to confuse us? Stag, lion, wolf, and dragon. Well, wolf with the Starks, that's a dire wolf, right? So, I think that will prove to be important. The lion, it's funny you should say that, because there is a vision about a lion. When she gets into the actual Room of the Undying, which we can come back to. That I'm not sure. Onions? Depends on what's under the onions, right, Claire?
Yeah.
So the first thing that she sees, and I don't know what this means. Is it a metaphor? She sees a beautiful naked woman being raped by 4 little men. Is that like Westeros? Is the woman Westeros?
Yes, that's what I see it as. Yeah.
So,
I mean, the body of a beautiful woman I see as representing Westeros. The 4 dwarves could be different things. It could be that. What did you say? The 4 kings.
Yeah.
Could be the 4 kings, or it could be the 4, like the north, south, east, west. Like. So if you think of like a map, like physically, like being, you know, gnawing away and raping and what have you, ruining this beautiful woman, then it could represent kings, it could represent the regions, it could represent the north, south, east, west, which again is represented by kings. The Feast of Corpses, the slaughter at the Feast of Corpses, is quite clearly, without question, the Red Wedding.
Yeah. And it's very specific, actually. When you read it, you go, of course it's the Red Wedding. Of course it's the Red Wedding. Then she sees William Derry, which is really sweet and sad, because she really wants to go. He sounds like such a nice man.
Yeah.
Then she sees an old man with silver hair on a barbed throne. Now, I think that's Bloodraven. I think that's, I don't know if that's Aerys, because he says, let him be the king of ashes. And I just wondered, is because just the long silver hair, the barbed throne. What do you think of that one?
Yeah. Well, it's the only thing I've got here is Aerys question mark. So I'm obviously questioning whether that was Aerys or not.
I kind of think it might be.
I mean, what we've got to remember, we've got to remember that some of these visions are of days past, days future, and days that will never pass. So that actually could have been a vision of Rhaegar as an old man on the throne, because we know that that never would have come to pass. Let him be the king of ashes. That could be him saying that his prophecy was all wrong. Who knows what that. Some of them are really obvious. Some of them are kind of like, oh yeah, this is an alliteration, allusion to, and some of them are like, okay, that must be something where it's like something where it doesn't happen.
And then obviously we seem to have the Tower of Joy.
Yes,
Rhaegar. And she feels like Rhaegar is looking directly at her. But the thing is, who does Rhaegar think the three heads of the dragon are? Who is that? Like Jon, which he calls Aegon. Jon, Dany, and him. Or what is your reading on his three heads?
Well, he says there must be one more, doesn't he? So he's already got. So in this vision, we're presuming that
he's not. It doesn't seem to be referring to his children, to the children he already has.
So yeah, so that must be himself, Aegon, who's just been born, and then one more. There must be one more. Yeah.
Yeah.
But then again, he's also prophesizing Aegon as the prince that was promised, and that his is the baby that's there in the vision. But he's also looking at Daenerys at the same time.
So is it possible that there's that Rhaegar has another child out there? Is what I was thinking. Is it possible?
It could be. Or it could be possible that Daenerys is Rhaegar's child.
Yes. Yeah.
He's looking right at her and saying there must be one more, and the dragon must have three heads. So,
and he goes to play the harp. Is he calling out inducing labour?
There's a number of things that this could be. A number of things.
Barbara says Aerys said that to Jaime right before Jaime killed him. Well, what the vision in the vision it says he can be the king of ashes. So I don't think he says that to Jaime. Does he? He says, "Let them burn, kill them all," or something. Is that right? I mean, I guess he could be talking about himself in the third person. Maybe Barbara. Then she has a vision of Pious Pre, and then she has that vision that you referenced of the false undying, where they're all beautiful and Carthian and all that kind of thing, and they're offering her all these things that you said, and she doesn't take them, and that moment where she just realizes this isn't the undying. It really reminded me of Indiana Jones, where he picks the simple chalice. Do you know that one? Where they're all going. It really reminded me of that. That she instantly goes, no. This isn't what it looks like.
Yeah.
And I think her experience with the dragons is teaching her that it's not, you don't just suddenly your life isn't suddenly transformed. Everything doesn't look sudden like shiny.
Yeah, it's not all there on a silver platter for you.
Yeah, like she's having a tough time helping these dragons grow. And then so what did you think then when she got into that room? It's really heady, I feel, when she finally gets in and she sees the Undying and that blue heart.
It's worth noticing that there's lots of disturbing noises coming from behind different doors, and at this point Drogon is extremely distressed. He's thrashing around and he is extremely uncomfortable. And I think you're right. I think if he wasn't there, then maybe she would have been, brainwashed into whatever it is they're doing here, because there's some kind of trippy stuff going on. Drink from the cup of ice, drink from the cup of fire. This does seem like a very important chapter. We've got ice and fire mentioned several times here. And then we've got the three fires you must light: one for life, one for death, one for love. The three mounts: one to bed, one to dread, one to love, and three treasons you will know. One is blood, one is gold, one is love. So we could look at that and kind of plot, okay, well, this is when this happened. This is when, we know that Jorah betrays her, so that's a treason. We know that that she needed to light a fire for life and death and in fact you could say the whole funeral pyre for Drogon was life, death and love, all at the same time. So that's kind of, you can kind of tick that off your list. So you could go through these and in different permutations of where she's up to and what she's already done and who may or may not betray her, or who she might sleep with for various different reasons. But I think it's the other things, the blue indigo shadows. So she sees, to me, that's more interesting. So she sees what looks like, this is where it's kind of like days that won't pass, which is, it looks like she sees Rhaego. So she sees this grown-up character that looks like a combination between a Targaryen and a Dothraki. So we presume it's Rhaego. And she sees a red. So I'm trying to make sense of my notes here. So there might be stuff that you can help me with here or in the comments. She sees a blue-eyed king.
I have the list here actually.
Okay.
From the wiki. There's 16 things that she sees.
Wow. Okay.
She sees Viserys dying.
Yeah.
Then she sees a tall lord with copper skin.
So that's Rhaego.
I was going to write them down, but then I was like, I'll just go to the wiki and take a screenshot.
Yeah, good.
Really lazy.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, good idea.
Tall lord with copper skin and silver hair. Yeah, you mentioned that. On a fiery stallion.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure if that. I don't think that is Rhaegar.
Rhaego.
Yeah. That makes sense. Okay. Dying prince with rubies, Rhaegar. The blue-eyed king with the red sword, his hand who casts no shadow, Night King, or Jon Snow. No, Jon doesn't have blue eyes, does he?
No, but he would be if he was maybe resurrected. Yeah.
A cloth dragon amidst a cheering crowd. I thought that might be her actually. Oh, or Aegon.
Aegon. Yeah.
Aegon. Sorry. Yeah. A great stone beast flying from the smoking tower, breathing shadow fire. I don't know what that is. Unless it's Bran.
Yes.
Could be Bran.
Yeah.
Anyone in the chat, if you want to help out with this, just to... Yeah, Barbara, I agree. Wiki is handy for these kind of things. Who do you think is Stannis, Ion? Her silver horse, given to her by Drogo. Number 8, a corpse at the prow of a ship, eyes bright in his dead face, smiling sadly. Damp hair?
Yeah.
So, sorry if that's a bit of a wind spoiler. A blue flower growing in a chink of a wall of ice. I mean, Lyanna or John. Shadow dancing in a tent. So, probably the Mary Mazdor thing.
Mm-hmm.
A little girl running towards a house with a red door. Again,
Mm-hmm.
that could be her. Mary Mazdor shrieking in flames as a dragon bursts from her. Yeah. A corpse being dragged behind a silver horse. This is the one that I think is Tyrion. A white lion running through grass taller than a man. I thought that might be Tyrion.
A white lion running through grass taller than a man.
Yeah.
Why do you think that's Tyrion?
Well, I feel like of all the Lannisters, he might be the goodest.
Yes.
So the white
Yeah.
perhaps being him. He might also be the purest Lannister if
Yeah.
he's the only Lannister child.
Yeah.
Tywin's
Yeah.
only born child, perhaps.
Yeah.
A
So
line
running through the field of grass, is that his travels in Essos?
perhaps, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. A line of naked crones emerging from a lake, kneeling before Dany beneath the Mother of Mountains. Now, I wasn't sure about this. It could be the Dothraki, the Dosh Caleen. It could also be wildlings. Or somebody coming across a lake to kneel before her, perhaps. I don't know. Is there a lake at Greywater Watch or something?
It
or
mentions
maybe
the mother.
the
If it's the Mother of
Mormonts.
Mountains, then I'll presume that it is the Dosh Caleen
Yeah.
at Vaes Dothrak,
Yeah.
and that's one of the days to come.
Days to come, yeah.
That will probably foreshadow her. What's happening next with her dragons, and because I genuinely believe what's going to happen. I know that this is different in the TV show. We're past that now in the TV show, but in the books, she's left where the Dothraki discover her and Drogon, and I believe that the Dothraki will bow to her show of power and strength through her dragon. They will see it as some sort of magical flying horse, and that they will submit to her and recognize her as the Khaleesi. And I think that's exactly what will happen when she gets back. I think that's how she will gain her strength, but I don't think it'll be exactly the same as we see in the TV show.
I think she will attempt to make the Dothraki more matriarchal, so that and then the last one is the 10,000 slaves crying mother.
Some interesting comments here. Let's have a look. So Shadow Beast, I want the Winterfell and Dragonstone gargoyles to come to life. Yeah, that could be. I mean, I think when it's like Stone Beast, that's not Stone Beast taking wing. If you think a beast taking wing, that kind of sounds like a dragon, but it's not. It's a Stone Beast.
I mean, it could be John Connington as well.
Yeah, it could be the wall. Does it something about mentioning about the shadow, something shadow? So that could be at the wall. Stannis, it could be the king with no shadow. Yeah, maybe. Any links with Geryon and the White Lion? Well, I suppose if we're presuming that the White Lion is Tyrion, then maybe that's him coming into contact with Geryon on his travels, and that there is a theory, isn't there, that Geryon is kind of saves him from the Stone Men.
Yes,
there's a situation with the Stone Men. Lemon Tree, so the house with the red door, and Lemon Tree is mentioned, and we've mentioned this before. I think with Game of Thrones, when we did Game of Thrones, and we said that we thought that this house with the red door was probably in Dawn.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm totally on board with that. I think
hence Lemon Tree, and that Dany was being hidden in Dawn, and she was too young to realise where she was. Did Drogo give Dany a White Lion cloak? Yes, he did actually, didn't he? For a wedding present, I think. Was it a white lion cloak?
With a hood, is that right?
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. Maybe it's her. Maybe it could be ghost grass. Because isn't that like what the Dothraki talk about?
Yeah, Barbara says she wears it all the time. Yeah, we all wish we knew exactly where the red door is. Yeah, lemon tree driving me crazy. It's in there for a reason. I'm sure it's there for a reason to do exactly that, to drive us crazy. I've Googled much and more about lemon tree growing conditions. Bless you. I'm sure you have.
Well, if you ever grow any, I'll always take them. I love them in gins.
Yeah. But it doesn't sound like a Bravos environment, really, or Pentos or any place that we know that she's been. I think it's Dawn.
So the other thing that I found interesting, because when I thought of that Indiana Jones thing, when I was thinking that, I was also thinking about, she has to drink from the cup of fire, drink from the cup of ice. Now, cups and chalices, that symbol is the symbol for the womb. And the idea of the Song of Ice and Fire potentially being not just the baby or babies that Lyanna and Rhaegar had, but any potential offspring of Dany and perhaps Jon later on, would be that would be the ultimate Song of Ice and Fire, I guess. Maybe. But yeah, just that idea of that drinking from the cup. It's something I think maybe to do with her fertility.
Yeah.
But that's a common symbol for a womb.
So Mother of Dragons, Mother of Dragons, Mother of Dragons is mentioned several times. Yeah. Daughter of Death, Daughter of Death, Daughter of Death is mentioned several times. We can't dismiss this, that a lot of this seems to kind of allude to maybe Daenerys doesn't make it at the end, and I don't know, but I mean, is she what? I suppose it depends on what your take is on Daughter of Death.
Well, in that her parents died as she was born, or they were already basically dead when she came into the world.
I just think on a very basic level, everything about this chapter just looks blue.
Yes.
It seems blue and feels blue. And for Dany, that's the opposite of Dany. She's red and fire and blood, and that's probably that left at the end of the chapter where Pyat Pri, like one of her Dothraki, what happens? I've run out of pages. I ran out of I've run out of space for my notes. I think he's not murdered, is he? He doesn't kill him. I think he just kind of...
He kills because he burns the heart, I guess everybody in there dies, potentially.
Yes.
I pray. I don't know if he dies, actually. I don't know. Well, I don't think we see about it. She runs out then. But I love the idea that everybody is being strengthened, or all this magic is being strengthened by dragons, and it's really creepy. It sounds like sorry, another literary reference, but Great Expectations. What's the name? Yeah, it sounds like that. It's really weird.
This is Havisham.
They're not breathing, and they're like, it's really creeping her out.
Yeah.
And it's very creepy. But the idea, everybody is growing stronger because of the dragons, but the dragons actually can tap into an inner strength that nobody else can. So this is the first time they use fire, right? It's the first time we see fire. So, and he uses it twice in the chapter. So it's almost like he's tapping into however strong everybody else is getting, the dragons will get even stronger than they are. So like their magic will always be...
Yes, and that's what it's described in the chapter, is if you just think about the colour, everything changed from indigo to orange at the end of the chapter. So that is Drogon doing exactly that, is taking, if it comes to House of Theon dying versus Drogon, or red versus blue, or ice versus fire, or old, you know, I don't know. I mean, if you can kind of boil it down to, like, you know, red equals fire and blue equals ice in terms of the magic and the religion, then in this scenario, red wins, fire wins, dragons win, you know, everything turned from blue to red or indigo to orange, which is essentially the same thing.
And there's no magic in this world without the dragons. Like, everybody is dependent on them. And we don't even know, well, with the exception of the whites, right? Because we saw them before we saw the dragons. So the chicken and egg.
Yes.
You know, because well, we saw them before, but the dragon eggs were already with Dany when we saw the whites. So it is very much chicken and egg. Like,
there must have been some trigger there, some kind of magical something that sparked something.
By the end of the Tyrion chapter that we'll get into next, I'm left wondering how many more dragon eggs are out there. In the Tyrion chapter, we find out that they found another stash of wildfire underneath the dragon pit, and I was wondering, well, would wildfire help bring about, you know, the de-stoning of a dragon egg as well? What will any of Dany's dragons give birth to or lay more eggs or whatever it is? Magic is in very real jeopardy if anything happens to these dragons, especially now that, like, Dany has wiped out potentially one of the most magical places on Earth, like, which is like it's kind of, it's nothing to be sniffed at. The destruction of the House of the Undying here, and the potential ramifications that will have on Karth, because, you know, this is very much the most magical place in Karth, and
it's
Karth
one of the oldest.
In the
it's one of the oldest places, isn't it? It's like a pinnacle. Absolutely, it's going to have some. I mean, interesting though that Weirwood was inside the House of the Undying, which is this ancient palace of dust. But yeah, I mean, Iron Throne is saying, you're absolutely right. Daughter of Death is, you know, Aerys, the Mad King, could be what's described as death, and she's obviously the daughter of.
And we don't know this, that we don't know the circumstances surrounding her mother's death. Like, Dany could have been born of death. Like, she could have been cut out of her mother. That may be an important part. That's like Macbeth and Macduff are very big influences on George. She loves that prophecy in Macbeth. So that could definitely, Dany could be a Macduff type character. That she could literally been cut from death. And that might be important as to where she's going now. Potentially. So anything else then from the House of the Undying? Any questions?
Anyone want to add anything? Like I said, I think I tend to, I seem to pay more attention to what was going on around the chapter rather than the meat and bones of the prophecy and the visions.
Oh yeah, that's what I wanted to say to you, actually. You, a couple of weeks ago, and for the last few weeks, you've been talking about the idea of the wall and how it looks multichrome, holographic. What did we say it was? Changing color, but that blue kind of blends in with the sky. And I was thinking a lot about that blue with this heart as well. And that old magic may have died. That a certain form of old magic may have been destroyed here, and it might be that the dragons, and even going back to the Doom of Valyria and the escape from the Doom of Valyria of the Targaryens, that it may be a battle between two different types of old magic, if you know what I mean.
That would make sense.
One magic could have tried to wipe out another magic with the Doom. And because they escaped, it didn't. But yeah, there's definitely, this might be two forms of old magic colliding, especially with the weirwood doors and everything. there's a definite sense that this feels colder and way more north. And I suppose to give the TV show its dues, it like they do have that great scene where she walks into the throne room and what looks like ash or snow is falling over the Iron Throne. I did like that scene, even though that isn't in the book. But Ian said, everything has happened before and will happen again, type of old magic wars. And it would make sense that then this Song of Ice and Fire is them finally coming together. That, like, there isn't going to be peace unless they, you know, because I mean, throughout the book, the human beings, like the human houses, have to marry to make alliances all the time.
So like trying to gain balance and harmony, and and
then maybe that brings about harmony worldwide or something. Although I don't think we're going to get that happy ending, but we'll see. So then we're into Tyrion. Very panicky Tyrion chapter, isn't it? Hey, Bran, how's it going?
Hi, Bran. I didn't really. I mean, I don't really get much from this chapter apart from this is all about getting battle ready again. So we see the impending doom of the Battle of the Blackwater and the build up to this and the preparations for it and what's happening in King's Landing, all through Tyrion's point of view chapters, which is why we get quite a few of them. And some of them, every now and again just have to be kind of, I don't know, to me this was a bit of a filler episode, a bit of a filler chapter. But there's a couple of things that I got from it, which is just there's something about Bran that I can't put my finger on. There is something about Bran that makes me feel as though he seems more than a sellsword should know about things like battle tactics. And he seems very confident in himself about this is what we should be doing. And I know that there are lots of theories about who Bran could be and whether or not he's possibly the last surviving Castamere, which would be superb if that was the case. I think that would be really excellent. But it does feel as though he's been planted there. And it might just be that he's done that himself. He's got himself into that position where he's right in there with the Lannisters. Certainly that seems to be the case in the TV show as well. He's constantly hanging around the Lannisters, so maybe there is something there to that.
Well, they already gave a potential Easter egg in the TV show as well, having him sing the Reigns of Castamere.
Yes,
and also you get to use his beautiful voice. Robson and Jerome plans. No.
So we also get 2 new Kingsguard sworn in. So this is the installation of Swan and Kettle Black, which Kettle Black seems to be selling secrets to Bronn, but also working for Cersei and also working for Littlefinger. I'm amazed that he hasn't slipped up already at this point, but got himself into a position of one of the, the finest brotherhoods in the entire realm, which is the Kingsguard, and up jumped from, obviously Cersei's put him in there because he's a valuable asset and resource to her in terms of spying and information and secrets and things, but Jesus, that just seems really weird. The other thing that I didn't notice about this chapter previously was that there was a letter from Balon offering a possible alliance, which I thought was like, whoa, that's a bit left field. That kind of came in from that's a bit of a curveball there from the King of the Iron Islands. I don't remember that. I don't remember Balon offering a possible alliance with King's Landing against the North. Interesting. So as you mentioned, more.
Sorry, I was just going to say, I wonder if that's something that Euron or Victorian will use. Tyrion will use later on. That potential alliance offer.
Yeah. And the only other thing is again this the more wildfire found under the dragon pit, and apparently the pyromancers have made more, and obviously it feels like what he's saying is that their ancient spells and secrets and ability to be able to pump out this amount of wildfire, which makes Tyrion suspicious, is because their skills have been amped up by the maybe they don't know this yet, but obviously the presence of dragons, it seems to just kind of, you know, put a turbo boost on anybody's magical abilities.
I did like that, because a lot of fans liken the dragons to nuclear weapons, and again, a very formative period for George, of course, is, you know, part of the Cold War. It would have been his formative years.
H-bombs.
Yeah, the idea that when you have nuclear weapons on the table, every other weapon outside that gets amplified, and the production of everything else goes up as well. It's not just about nuclear weapons, but all of them. And like the wildfire definitely feels like that. Yeah, there's a couple of things that I feel like there's a lot of foreshadowing that we've already had payoff for in the series so far. And guys, if you have any questions in the chat or any comments you want to make, please feel free to do so. Tyrion, well, at this stage, I still don't really know what's keeping Tyrion in King's Landing, apart from honor, maybe, or, you know, daddy issues, I guess. And I guess he's better off a dwarf as a hand of the Lannisters than he is, you know,
well, by his own confession, he is finding all this a bit of a thrill, isn't he? He's, I mean, when he's lying in bed and reflecting on the end of the days with Shay, he's thinking to himself, "This is fucking great. I'm having the time of my life here." So, and also there is that thing about he wants to protect the children as well.
Yeah.
From the rest of his family, by the sound of it.
But then, yeah. So the reason he's panicking so much is he has the most to lose if King's Landing falls, because the people will kill him. And I'm really interested in the Antlermen. Varys comes to tell about the Antlermen. I actually wondered, you know, if Bran isn't a secret Casimir, did he maybe have a hand in helping the Antlermen? I don't know. Just a wild theory. Definitely Littlefinger. We find out later on Littlefinger sells, I can't remember, in Feast. He sells the position of chief jailer to one of the Antlermen in Mighty Storm.
Right, okay.
Definitely a merchant class that are helping the commoners in King's Landing.
Yeah.
They're arming them and to help Stannis. So
yes, these are Baratheon men. Yeah.
Yeah. And they're called Antlermen. I think Tyrion says they should be called Hot Hearts or something, because Stannis doesn't use the stag anymore. It's all about the flaming heart now. So I wonder, will we see any more from the Antlermen now that they do control the jails? And I don't think that has changed. Correct me in the chat if I've misremembered that, but I think they still have that position.
Yeah,
I believe anyway. I mean, Cersei isn't very good at uprooting somebody completely. The Lannisters aren't great at that. Like Boris is back in. He's the chief taster, isn't he? The when Tommen is in charge. So and Joffrey, I guess. Oh no, it's when Tommen, because it's after Joffrey. Jaime he takes him out and makes him chief taster. So they're not very good at uprooting anybody completely. Like Joffrey didn't get rid of what's his name, the guy that's with Sansa, the knight, the drunken fella.
Oh,
what's his name?
Dantos.
So they're not very good at completely uprooting these people. And again, you pointed out with Bran, who's deeply untrustworthy, and also those Antlermen are in debt to the crown.
Yeah.
And I wonder, will they have any role to play with the Iron Bank later on, potentially, and the jailing thing? There's something not quite right. Yeah. Anyway, sorry. I mean, I'm very interested in those guys because I think they're mainly merchants, and they have history guilds and stuff like that. The guilds are still a huge deal in Zurich.
Yeah.
When other institutions have been uprooted here, like they're still a huge deal. So I think they're important. I think they will be important later.
Emily's part of a guild.
Who? Oh, really?
Yeah, she's part of the Guild of Soap Makers.
Oh yeah, that's right. Oh, very nice. Find out are they antler men.
I know. It makes me feel as though I want to be in a guild.
Yeah, we'll make a
We can
nail
make a guild.
polish / Game of Thrones. Very unique.
Yeah.
Very tiny group. So Tyrion appoints a new High Sparrow, we find out. He's also going to wipe out a large portion of this, like, part of the city where along the quays where people have kind of all these refugees coming in, I guess, have set up shop. It kind of reminds me of the bridge in Florence, if anyone knows that bridge that like has all these little huts and stuff on it. And
people like barnacles appearing and just stuck to the side of the wall.
Yeah, it's great.
Starving for food, and you know, I was horrified at that initially, but then it was kind of like, he does say the people who've made the homes there just relocate them, move them on, but just burn everything else that's just kind of, you know, set up there. And it's like, that's...
Well, he that won't be explained to them. And even if it is, they won't get it.
Yeah.
So, and you know, he is warned that, you know, they're not going to be happy about this. And he's like, oh, screw it. Like, we have to get them out of there. The thing that I think there is a bit of, obviously we know what the payoff here is, but Shay, he restricts her luxuries and access to luxuries. And it made me think, because it's the thing that my husband constantly says to me, made me think of Chris Rock and that line from Chris Rock where he says, you know, a woman cannot go down in lifestyle. Once she's reached a certain, it's only up. There's never going down. That's what my husband always says to me. I'll never be able to go down in lifestyle, like my parish character. I like the writings on the wall in that, which, you know, you can't, like, you were trying to force her into kitchens, that wasn't going to happen.
No, she's got expectations.
You're taking away all her little luxuries. It's not good. And just with Bran as well, there's just too many. He seems very alone, and he says he can only trust, I think it's about a quarter of the city guard, which isn't very good.
No.
And he's also got people, he doesn't trust Varys, who even brings him information. Tyrion, he still has a long way to go to, and like he's in a even worse position now as we head into Winds, but long way to go to build up meaningful relationships, I feel, with people.
Yes, definitely.
And I feel, and I know you feel like this as well, that once he does have somebody's trust and he can trust them completely, he'll break it. And I think he'll be the betrayal.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
I think he's going to betray Dany big time. Big time. Yeah. We talked a lot about that when we were analysing the last series as well. So yeah, that's all I have for Tyrion.
Yeah. So the last one is Theon.
Theon again. This is the after. Theon wakes up with nightmares and he has this sense of dread and all that kind of thing. And his instincts as a hunter tell him that the wolves should be quiet. The wolves should be howling or making some noise, and they're not. So he knows they're gone. And he's trying to go to his instincts as a hunter all the time. And I kind of felt, Theon, that's all you are. You're just a hunter. You're not even a gatherer. You're not a leader. You know, you're not very good at reading people. You know.
Well, it's funny because I got the impression that Theon feels as uncomfortable in Winterfell in this chapter as he does when he's in the Ghost in Winterfell chapter, when he's Reek much later on. He feels constantly uneasy about the situation that he's in. And he even thinks about, there's a brief moment where he thinks about Ned, but he thinks about being like Ned, as in like being lordly, like the Lord of Winterfell. So he wants to be like that, but he just knows that he can't be. So he's just this incredible sense of unease from Theon.
I thought you were going to talk about him having sex in Ned's bed, because that's a real turn on, which is kind of gross.
Yeah,
when you think about, like, they're always kind of bed hopping.
again, he's constantly trying to just establish who he is, Theon. That's his, you know, he wants to feel as though he's doing the right thing here, but it's not. He just doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel right. It's funny that you say he wakes all kind of nightmarish and everything, because I've made a note that Theon has a dreamless sleep, unlike the Starks. So he wakes up. He doesn't have these like horrendous dreams where he's telling us through his point of view things that are happening in his dream state. He just wakes up and feels uneasy and anxious. So we get him trying to intimidate the small folk in the yard, where they're just being typically northern, you know, just silent and not telling him what he wants to know. We find out that Rickon and Bran and the wolves have gone, along with Osha, and that the guards have been attacked really quite gruesomely by the dire wolves. So the hunt is now on for Bran and Rickon. It's funny, in amongst all of this, that Theon thinks about marrying Sansa to strengthen his grip on the north.
Yeah.
Again, he's scrabbling around trying to find something that will just kind of define who he thinks he needs to be.
He's a bit of a horn dog, isn't he?
Yes.
Bran the Builder says just change the sheets. Yeah, I know, but still, like, it's so gross. Yeah. Especially when you know who's going to occupy the bed after that. Ion Throne says, didn't Theon also have sexy time in the captain's bed when arriving at the Iron Islands? He did indeed. We may have a salt baby there. Ion says, mayhaps he has a special interest in that. I think he does. Yeah. And Bran the Builder says, well, the ship's captain. I'm impressed with Westeros. They don't have motels.
But I think this is it's funny because when I don't know anyone else who's listened. This is the first time where I've actually listened to the audiobooks with
Roy
Dotrice. And the only thing that he's great, but he does Theon in this like young Michael Caine accent, which makes
it's a kind of a stop-start kind of.
Why am I doing that? And why did I do that? He makes Theon sound like a young Michael Caine, which is comical. But I do think that this is a feature. So, you know, so sleeping in the Lord's bed and things like that. It's kind of, I suppose it's similar to that feeling of like the first night, taking the Lord or the King taking the bride on the first night. It's that sense of like, I've kind of marked my territory, because he feels that he needs to mark his territory. He needs to know who he is. He needs to establish his authority, but he can't. He just can't. Nobody takes him seriously. I mean, even previously in the previous chapter with the wolves and Bran, when they were actually breaking into Winterfell, everybody's thinking about Cleftjaw as the threat, and as the, everyone's worried about Cleftjaw. Nobody even mentions Theon as being any kind of a threat. So it's he's constantly feeling undermined by his own men, by the small folk at Winterfell. And now he's in this situation where he desperately needs some sort of story to because he knows he's losing his grip. He knows that if Bran and Rickon can't be found and they can't be presented in some way, shape or form, he's lost it entirely. He's lost Winterfell. That's it. So this is the backdrop of this chapter. The only other thing that I've got of note in this chapter from my point of view, is yet again Maester Luwin talking about the Reeds and the Crannogmen being close to the children of the forest and possibly knowing what their magic is, and we'll be careful of the Reeds, and this kind of, it's like Maester Luwin seems fascinated by the children of the forest, yet he's telling Bran that they don't exist anymore. So what the hell? He's just a complete mystery to me, Maester Lewin.
Yeah, totally.
And the only other thing, obviously, is Reek's trying to suggest about the miller's wife and going back to the miller's cottage, and Theon remembering that he's had a tumble with the miller's wife a couple of times. So
But
knowing
she wasn't
what,
that good. Don't forget, she
wasn't that good. So there's the seed of that theory there that Theon is a kin slayer, because those children could have actually been his children.
Yeah, at least the youngest one, anyway. Right? I mean, how long ago? Maybe, I suppose he could have been sleeping with her when he was 15, I guess.
Yeah.
Sonny says, Theon was doomed as soon as he went to Winterfell as a child. We never hear that his mother writes to him. Nope. He's not accepted at Winterfell. He goes home and is mocked. Yeah, and he kind of blows it here, because at this stage, and I meant to mention when we were talking about Bran, Lewin sends out 2 birds and one of them gets shot down, but one of them has made it to White Harbor. So, so they have way more advanced notice of what's happening.
Yeah, they've got Raven intel.
Yeah, and they can put in preparations. They're kind of away from everybody else as well, so they can put in preparations for this grand northern conspiracy way in advance. Because as far as they're concerned, Theon now has children of 3 major houses in Westeros. When he arrives in Bran's chapter, he's got the 2 Freys, 2 Reeds, and the 2 Starks. So, I mean, he completely blows it.
Yeah,
he could have made some sort of threat. I mean, there's no way he was going to be able to keep Winterfell anyway. I mean,
but he was. You think you're right, actually, with the children. He was in a strong position.
Yeah, he was. Yeah. Ian says, Roy de Treese, 1,000 voices in one. Yeah, it's a shame he won't be around to do wins. And hola, Lisa Henry.
Oh, hi, Lisa.
I miss you, Lisa. We need to do a hangout soon.
Yeah.
3 of us. Okay, so Bran says he's trying to establish a place in the world. He's never fit in anywhere. He's been a hostage all his life. Now he's trying to impress a father that doesn't care. He's completely lost soul. Yeah, I think I agree. And I think even his horniness, his idea of having sex all the time, I mean, there is a certain amount of I like, that's a psychological thing. I feel like he's constantly trying to literally spread his seed. He's constantly trying to find affection, even through sex. Like like, as much as, he was horrible to the captain's wife and everything, or the captain's daughter. In this chapter, the tavern wench that comes to him. I mean, it is as much about her pleasure as it is his. It's not just. There is a certain amount of. There is some part of Theon that is constantly looking. And he recognizes that rape is bad. I mean, in his own twisted way, he recognizes that rape isn't good. And so did Osha, obviously. She killed one of those guys. I'm guessing it was Osha and not a direwolf, because they would have ate him, right?
Yeah, it was a brutal attack, though.
Really brutal. And again, that image of he's used that before. I think he used it actually in the woods with Bran, the idea of the intestines looking like snakes. Reek is very interesting here, Ramsay, and completely manipulating him at every turn.
Yeah.
And I actually forgot that it was basically his idea to go to the mill, that basically taking those kids is his idea. And also he kind of reveals who he is with his love for flaying, so yeah, it's more of Theon being lost in the woods chapter. He literally can't see the wood from the trees, or the trees from the wood. He doesn't use the knowledge he had living with the Starks to find them. He would have found them very easily if he just sat down and just cleared everybody out and said, right, where are they? Where did we play? Where did we? Because he would have been with them. He would have played with them in the crypts, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So he should, or maybe he didn't, but I think he did, right? He would have been there.
Yeah, I think he would have been around, yeah, because he was very pally with Rob, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Not so much John, but Rob, definitely. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you think Lewin is helping them? Do you think Lewin knows where they are at this stage?
Not sure. Probably not, actually, because he does seem genuinely scared.
And the darkest thing about this is that Theon doesn't want to lose face in front of Asha. That's what makes him go to the mill, really.
Yeah.
He's already sent for her. And
well, he probably realizes that because this was never the plan. This is him wanting to establish who he is by taking Winterfell. This was never the plan. But he's found himself now in this situation. And he's probably thinking, if this was Osha in this situation, this wouldn't have happened. It would have been, she would have dealt with it completely differently. She would have had the respect of her men. She would have probably rallied around the small folk of Winterfell by now. So he's completely, constantly intimidated by Asha.
It's so funny that he thinks in his head, Asha and Osha are very alike. Their names even sound the same. The show. But they changed Asha's name to Yara because it sounded too like Osha. I also the fact that he's only left with the Frey boys now and they're completely worthless to them because they're actually really eager to help him.
Yeah,
it's like you lost the Reeds and not like you lost the Starks and the Reeds. Like, are you insane? The Reeds are the only ones that have managed to stay out of everything at the moment, and you could have dragged them in for your own benefit, and there you gone and lost the whole lot of them. And I like the fact that, you know, we leave Bran's chapter thinking, shit, Osha's after betraying Bran. And there's a lovely irony in that, you know, that Theon saved Bran from Osha, and now Osha's saving Bran from Theon, which is nice. But yeah, so next week we have Jon 6 to Sansa 5.
Okay, so how many chapters is that? I've not done the count for that yet. I think
2, chapter 51 to chapter 58.
Okay, so we're in the home stretch now.
We have 2 weeks left after that, so three weeks left.
Brilliant.
And then we have, I still haven't gotten around to scheduling.
Oh.
I reckon
wow.
16 sessions, I think.
Yeah.
I don't know, maybe, yeah. I think it's going to be 8 for each. Maybe take a break off. Maybe a week.
About a chapter a night, if I'm pacing myself properly, is doable for me.
Okay. Yeah. So I'll work it out like that then. Yeah. I'm using the new ones because my one is signed by George, my old one.
Oh.
And I don't want to mark it or anything. So,
yeah.
Okay, so thank you so much, folks, for joining us in the chat. We'll be back next week at the same time. We always start a little bit after 8, sometime between 8 and a half 8. My time.
Or if in the UK.
7 or half 7, your time, yeah. So that's it. Thank you so much to everybody who joined us. Happy reading. I'm actually looking forward to Jon and Sansa next week. Yeah, I'm not enjoying Theon as much this time around because it's very hard. I'll actually prefer a Reek chapter. I'm looking forward to a Reek chapter. Thank you, Sunny. Thanks to everybody. If you have any questions in advance of next week, you can leave them in the chat here. You can also message me directly. Sunny message me directly on YouTube, and I can have them in advance if you like, or just comment on this video. And the live streams are all scheduled for the rest of A Clash of Kings, so you can go and hit the little bell and make sure you have your notifications on and all that kind of thing. Thank you so much, Ion. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Claire.
You're welcome. Thank you very much, everybody.
Okay.
And we'll see you next week.
See you next week, everybody. Bye.
Bye.